I've referenced many times just how important the book Unseen Forces was to my development in the way I looked at the world and my place within it. As a magical treatise, this was the first one for me, and it's the one that opened all the other doors. I was looking through it today, and I was struck again by the way Manly Palmer Hall just paints this very vivid picture of the world that we don't see. Our graveyards at night, there hang globes of phosphorescent light and wavy draperies of phosphorus, for the human body, when disintegrating, creates a luminous mist. The ancient peoples called this luminous mist a shadow or shade. It was also said that the shades of men walked the byways of their past, like Hamlet's ghost on the castle battlement. Generally speaking, we may divide the ghosts who walk in the night into two general classes. First, there are the disintegrating bodies of decarnated intelligences. Man dies not once in nature, but many times. He sloughs off not only a physical vehicle, but later an etheric body, an astral body, and lastly, a mental body. These are cast off, the densest first, like the layers of an onion. When cast off from the spiritual monad, each of these shells floats in its own essence of being for a considerable time before entirely disintegrating, because the subtle essence of nature preserve for many ages the bodies of which they are composed in the same way that alcohol preserves flesh. The essences of nature are filled with slowly decomposing bodies, which were cast off after their experiences had been incorporated into the spiritual organisms of man. In these essences of nature, there also dwell creatures who take upon themselves these slowly dissolving bodies, as a player dons a masquerade costume or wears a mask. These masqueraders are usually the elementals of the ether. The ghosts seen are usually etheric bodies from which the spiritual consciousness have fled, and they either drift past the vision of man like a derelict floating on the sea, partly animated by the subtle substances of the ethers, or they have been vitalized, sometimes humanized, by an intelligence from one of these subtle planes. People say, "The vision I saw was not a floating corpse. It moved, it raised its hand, it looked at me." They do not realize that this drifting, moving mass of etheric protoplasm is floating on the surface and in the midst of a sea of ether. If one could walk upon the ocean bottom and see the great waves, branches of seaweed dimly outlined in the pale green light, he would see a substance incapable in itself of locomotion or animation beyond the vital principle of propagation. Only those who have been conscious on the lower planes of the ethereal worlds can understand what it means to see these floating shells drifting ever fainter until many years later, sometimes centuries, a strange face, so faint as hardly to be visible, marks the final disintegration of the ethereal specter. The etheric plane is actually of the physical world. It is tied to the physical globe because in reality it is the mold into which the dense body is cast, just as the physical anatomy of man is really molded into the etheric double.